Hey everyone, we've opened the show talking about it before, and we've also talked about it on social media, but we have teamed up with the Kentucky Derby Museum to bring you their Bourbon Legends series on this podcast. This is a fantastic opportunity for us to partner with them and bring all this content to the official podcast of bourbon. I can tell you, it's a much better experience in person, so you have to get tickets. And for the past few episodes, we've been telling you, go buy your tickets online for the next Legends series that'll be taking place on April 20th. Well, guess what? All the tickets have been sold out. And this is the last Legends series for this season, but we're going to be sure to let you know who's on deck for the next season so you can get your tickets early. This episode will feature Tom Bulleit of the Bulleit Distilling Company being interviewed by Fred Minnick. There were some hiccups early on, so we missed a few of the first minutes, part of the beginning of this, so this is really just kind of jump right into it. And remember, this is a listener-supported podcast, so your sponsorships go a long way in keeping this podcast alive. Please consider being a sponsor and donate as little as $1 a month at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. Enjoy this week's episode.
Play Whiskey Wednesday, Round 11, the memory game. Until June 26, each week you can win one of our 12 incredible grand prizes. Select $2 at checkout. And if they match on drawing night, you'll win that bottle. Not a match? No worries. You still score a Weller 12-year. Every $5 ticket gives you 5 chances to win, including 4 weekly bonus prizes. Get your tickets now at give270.org. Charitable Gaming License ORG 0002703.
Always find what you love at Total Wine & More. With so many great bottles to choose from at the lowest price, it's easy to find your favorite Cabernet or a new single-barrel bourbon to try with some help from one of their friendly guides. And with every bottle comes the confidence of knowing you just found something amazing. With the lowest prices for over 30 years, find what you love and love what you find only at Total Wine & More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly and be 21. From their bar to yours, Chad and Sarah of the popular YouTube channel It's Bourbon Night bring you their favorite at-home old-fashioned mix with the new Elemental Elixir's Golden Hour Syrup. It's a custom-made syrup with notes of bold black tea, warm spices, and orange zest. All you need is your favorite whiskey and ice. No bitters needed. One bottle makes 16 drinks, so that's only $1 a cocktail before you add your own whiskey. They can also be enjoyed in other cocktails or spirits, mocktails, coffee, tea, and anything you can think of. It's crafted locally in Lexington, Kentucky, and you can get your bottle now at whiskeyambitions.com. Do you ever pour yourself a bourbon, swirl it around, and then start struggling to come up with tasting notes? And perhaps you're also looking for a good Father's Day gift idea. Well, you can now solve both with a kit from Knows Your Bourbon. And unlike other nosing kits on the market, Knows Your Bourbon kits feature real ingredients for the most authentic aromas. You can smell real Tahitian vanilla bean instead of some synthetic aroma that's just made from chemicals. So head on over to knowsyourbourbon.com and enter code BP10 for 10% off your order. Ed Bly and Rising Tide Spirits are back again with a new release of Old Stubborn Bourbon. And this release of Old Stubborn is a premium hand marriage of 10, 11, and 12-year cask strength barely filtered pot still bourbon. It comes in at a staggering 123.8 proof, and the flavoring grain for this one, which the last one was wheated, but this time it's now rye. Rich, sweet, and bold with a long finish that's sure to be another eye-opener. You can order online at Sealbox or thebourbonconcierge.com, and you can even purchase in person at Revival Vintage Spirits, and even now with very few select stores in Kentucky. You can get it now while you can, but be sure to do it because it's not going to last long.
So while the family recipe is passed down, no Bulleit touches whiskey until, or is involved in the whiskey business until you. Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
There was no other Bulleit descendants touching, in the whiskey business?
No, extended relatives, but not direct in the line. I have aunts and uncles. I have, it's a typical Kentuckian. How many of you all from Kentucky? Everybody. In Kentucky, should I say this? Well, I'm a Kentuckian. You can ask us if we are related, but it is impolite to ask how, which is typical of a lot of states, as a matter of fact. And for instance, in Bardstown, we have our Bardstown family come up for Christmas every year, and just counting the siblings and our grandchildren we're up to 87 people. So I'm related to a lot of people in Bardstown, and of course a lot of them have been all sorts of.
And you're related to some of the distilling families as well.
Yeah.
Well, who all are you related to in the business?
We're going to be truthful, like about this?
Yeah.
I thought we weren't going to ask questions like that. We won't speak of the degree very possibly.
All right.
Well, the Bulleits, certainly. My cousin, Dick Heaton, married Alice Jane Bulleit. Alice Jane Bulleit ran Mile Kentucky Home for a long time. I was just telling you a story about that.
Yep.
Probably one of the reasons. My first cousin, Dick Heaton, has been mayor of Bardstown. My first cousin, Bobby, was the judge down there. And probably that, the Bixlers, if you go back one line.
Wow. Yeah.
If you go back one line to the Bixlers, or historic people that you would know about.
Yeah. So you start, you have a very successful legal career. Tell us about your time as a professional attorney.
Well, I had a nice legal career. I enjoyed being a lawyer. It's such a pain to get to be one. I guess the best way to, maybe I'll describe the route to get there. It'd be more fun than what it was like to look at papers and write contracts all day. You wouldn't believe how much fun that was. Actually, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't really exciting. It wouldn't be something really exciting to talk about. When I finished my undergraduate work at the University of Kentucky, my father went to the University of Notre Dame, was like a major egghead, and I came back after some years at U of K, and he said, "Tom, your undergraduate work has been abysmal." And I was so abysmal, I did not know what the word meant, and said, "Thanks, Dad." And he said, I want to be a master distiller. I've been working between school terms. I would work out here at the Burnham Distillery where we made I.W. Harper and J.W. Dant back then. Said, I would really want to go into the distilling business. We've got a family recipe, and half our Bardstown relatives are doing this and that, or one thing and another in it. And he said, well, Tom, you're going to be going in the military like everyone else. Dad was a disabled Second World War veteran, far and away the best man I've ever known in my life. He said, you will be going in the military like everyone else, and you'll be a lawyer. I thought, well, this is going to be pretty tricky there. And so I looked into being an officer, and of course, abysmal grades does not attract the officership people that decide on that. So I went out here to the Navy Reserve and said, well, I'll join the Navy Reserve. And they said, okay, Tom, what do you want to be? You want to be an electrician? And I majored in English and minored in history. I had an engineering friend say, we speak English, Tom. That was not exactly like that. But majored in English, so I didn't know anything have those skills. And they said, well, you want to be a bosun's mate. A bosun's mate knows how to run, knows everything about a ship, including all the knots it takes to do ships and sail. I'm making that up because I'm not a bosun's mate. And I said, well, I don't know about that. He said, well, how about you can be a medic, a corpsman? I said, well, I maybe could do that. He said, well, I said, what's that like? He said, well, you work in the hospital with the nurses. And I said, well, I presume the nurses would be like grown-up sorority girls. I said, how good is this? This is the military? I had no idea. So I finished signing my name, and he said, son, you are in the United States Marine Corps now. So I'd neglected to consider the fact that the Marine Corps is part of the Navy. I don't know if you all know that. I did not at the time. And they draw all of their chaplains and all of their medical facility from the Navy. So I went to Great Lakes to learn how to be a corpsman, Camp Lejeune to learn how to be a field medic, and then went with the 1st Marine Division in Vietnam. And then, this is not a short answer either.
That's fine.
And then I remembered my father said, now you're going to go to law school. So we're in Phu Bai or some little place north of Da Nang, and I went to the gunnery sergeant. I said, Gunny, I want to take the LSAT down in Da Nang. I have no idea how I knew they were giving it or whatever, but I did. And he said, what the blank? Just like forget about it, it can mean anything. But in this particular instance, he said, it meant get out of my face, corporal. I don't talk to anybody under sergeant.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. But now you wouldn't believe how smart gunnery sergeants can get when they have a couple of beers. Amazing. Same question, same answer, but it meant yes. So he garnered this enthusiasm for my legal career. He got me a Jeep, a driver, and me and the machine gunner, and we went down Highway 1, and I took the LSAT exam to get in law school. And I passed. And so my advice to any of you all look a little bit older, you're probably not going to law school now, but to the extent that your prodigy does, my advice to them was, well, one of the things I did when I got there, you take off your pistol and you put your weapon down there on the table and you take the test. So I laid my pistol down on the table. So my advice to be, if you've got kids who are going to take the LSAT, tell them to take a pistol. It worked for me. It's relatively unlikely in today's society, isn't it?
Well, I'm looking out at the audience, and it looks like people need a drink.
I think they do need a drink.
Let's go to the first tasting. Now, we'll talk more about this, but you just now started your own. You have your own distillery now.
We do.
You just launched. You just had the grand opening last week.
We do.
And until then, or you've been acquiring stocks from elsewhere. Can you tell us where the current bottling for the regular Bulleit is right now?
Well, the bottling, of course, is Kevin is over at
stitzel-weller.
All the bottling over
the
at
whiskey inside the bottle.
I caught you on
These
that.
lawyers.
The lawyer. I caught you on that. We've contracted for our spirits, as everybody knows. That's probably the most poorly kept. But our contracts say we're not supposed to tell where it's from. I guess you go on the Google. I mentioned the Google, which is on the line. And you could go on that, and it'll pop right up there. But we're really not supposed to say.
I know you had a Four Roses contract for a long time.
Right. Initially, I was when in 1987, Bill Goldring. There are two families in the business now, and most of the rest of us are affiliated with big companies. Max Shapira and his family at Heaven Hill are independent, and Bill Goldring down in New Orleans at Sazerac and Magnolia Corporation, a variety of corporations are independent. He distilled for me between 1987 and 1996 or so. And then when we partnered with Seagram's, my chief skill is falling uphill. We fell uphill into a partnership with Seagram's, and then we moved our distilling to their facility in Lawrenceburg, and then their facility for our rye up in Lawrenceburg, Indiana.
Mm-hmm. And so with every juncture, you gave them a recipe and they contract distilled, or you?
No, and initially when I was sourcing the liquid from, and I don't think any more of that's around anywhere. If you see it, buy it. It's in a little square bottle. It says Bulleit. It'd be very valuable, not because of me or anything, just because it almost doesn't exist out there.
Yeah.
And that was made under pretty much a general recipe that Bill
mm-hmm.
was making for me. And then when we got together with Seagram's, we could start distilling our recipe, which is the 2/3 corn, 1/3 rye. And then in 2001, Fred knows this history better than I do. In 2001, 2002, I think the approvals went through for Pernod Ricard and Diageo to buy Seagram's.
Yep. So this, what is the age range right now on the Bulleit?
It's going to be about 5 to 7 now. He drank his. I was going to take you through a tasting. I can't believe it.
Well, we've all done tastings together, right? Who hasn't done a tasting with me before? Just one?
Yeah.
So this is how it goes. You look at first you want to look at the color. Right? You know, look at the color, very important. The darker it is, the longer it's been on the barrel. And then you want to swirl it around and nose it. When you nose the bourbon, you want to smell with your mouth open, helps cycle it out. And you're not picking up just the alcohol fumes. And when you taste, you want to fill it all over your palate. And Fred Noe likes to say to do the Kentucky Chew, which is to go, I don't know about you, Tom, but I've never been able to pull that off in public.
Right.
You know, it just Fred knows much cooler than I am, and he can pull it off. But yeah, so that's just a basic. That's kind of how we flow. We do a tasting, we talk.
Yeah,
we do
no,
a
that's
tasting,
true.
we talk.
And then to the extent that you didn't drink it all, like Fred did,
Yeah.
if you've got a little water there, I love to add, I've never talked to a master distiller any place, so I'm sure you haven't either, Fred, that they didn't say that water is to whiskey as oxygen is to wine. It really opens it up. There's actually a molecular change. I don't think I can spell the word molecular, or organoleptic analysis, which is what we just did. There's a molecular change, so it's really so different. I think particularly our orange label, the one you tasted first, is that the orange label, the one we tasted first?
Yes.
The one that says Bulleit, that is just Bulleit. And then I think there's such a dramatic, to me, Dad and I would drink bourbon on the rocks, is the way most people in Kentucky would grow up drinking bourbon after they're 21. But that ice has the same effect, obviously. Let it melt a little bit, and it's a huge change to me. I think it's much more approachable. I think it's more flavorful. But the bourbon really opens it up. With Scotch, and these are the American whiskeys or high-proof whiskeys, so you don't have to do just a little. You can cut it back a third if you want to.
So let's go back to
Should I go on?
the different facilities. Let's go to the different facilities. When you go from facility to facility to facility, did you notice a change in quality, or did you notice an inconsistency or anything like that with your whiskey?
I think we in Kentucky, and gosh, you all Kentuckians know that we're really proud of our whiskeys, and we're proud of all of them. I think when we're out on the road at Whiskey Fest, and I run into Jimmy Russell or Bill Samuels or Elmer T. Lee or some of the giants we've lost here recently, we're all really good friends. I have great respect for their whiskeys. I don't think there would be, certainly as far as quality goes, there's going to be a different, if you change the mash bill, it's obviously going to be a different style of whiskey. But I've never noticed, I think, for instance, when we were with Bill Goldring's shop over there, they make great whiskeys. It's now Buffalo Trace. Then it was Leestown, Ancient Age, Leestown, now Buffalo Trace. They make definitive whiskeys there, certainly. And then we've always, I think every place we've been, there's going to be a subtle change when you change the recipe.
So when you started in 1987, that was not necessarily a good time in bourbon. The only really positive market that was going on was Japan. And a lot of people were focusing on Japan and Australia. Why in the world did you make the decision to start a brand in probably one of the worst times in bourbon history?
Well, I think what's the quote? From Teddy Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, do what you can with what you have where you are, which I think is a great quote. It's been a little tricky for me to be an astronaut. I'm 38 years old now and 6'2", and I'm not in the shape that I was, so I never would qualify to be somebody like that. Obviously, I didn't qualify to be an electrician in the Navy. So but I did grow up in the industry. I knew, but the relatives, for instance, I think the first heated discussion I ever heard was a debate in the Bardstown Thanksgiving table between two of my relatives, one in supply, one in marketing, about the fact that the cork machine didn't work right, and he wished we could find a better one. I say heated discussion, right? That's what we'll call that. What was the question?
It was basically.
Is that the answer? I passed the LSAT. I said that.
And the bar. And you tried some cases before the Supreme Court.
No, gosh.
The Kentucky Supreme Court.
No.
All right. Well, I got that wrong.
No. I was a green eyeshade lawyer. I don't know where the courthouse is.
You were a tax attorney.
Yeah.
I got something right.
Yeah.
1 for 3 on your law
career.
I
didn't practice much tax.
You don't talk much about your law career.
What was the question?
It was basically why did you start when there was really at a time when business people would say.
I always wanted to do it. And literally went back to my father and said, I really want to do this. And you would go back to, in that era, you would, if my son, I said to my son, you're going to be a lawyer. He said, I've got a guitar and I'm going to Nashville. I don't, big deal. But you did what your dad said. So I went back and asked him, and he said, well, it's between you and your banker, which was a yes from him and a no for money. So it's something I always wanted to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
and
was
I enjoyed
it like?
law. I enjoyed practicing law. I came back. I was an abysmal undergraduate. I went to University of Louisville Law School here, and I was a notes editor on the Law Review. I was quite a good law student, and then went from there to I did a graduate degree in tax law at Georgetown. Got an LLM at tax law at Georgetown. All on the GI Bill. I can believe 54 months on the GI Bill. Is that amazing? It's great.
And your strategy for bourbon was much different than most people's. You really put a lot of focus on the bartender. Was that something that you did early on, or is that something that you learned as you progressed?
Well, we didn't have any money. So if you don't have
So you focused on the bartender because you didn't have any money.
Yeah, we didn't. Well, we couldn't. You advertise. Most brands, I don't have an MBA, but an MBA person or a business person will say, you build brands with advertising, either print, outdoor, radio, television, whatever. That's what a brand is. You advertise. That's why you have advertising, marketing, and stuff like that. And we didn't have any money to do that. So, but I did remember I had a meeting in 1991 with John Magliocco, the Magliocco family,
Yeah.
which is, Peerless Distributing, which is now merged with, it's now Empire Spirits. And John, he went to University of Pennsylvania, and I knew a fellow, the network guy. And at the time, he said to me, when I said, will you distribute our bourbon here in Metro New York? And he had like 17,000 accounts. It would have been a bonanza. And he said, no. And I said, well, and he said, but I will tell you this, Tom. He said, the bartenders are the captains of our industry, and brands are built on premises. I may have been the only person in America that didn't know that at the time, but I took him at his word. And of course, I could go bar to bar. I could work with salesmen, our on-trade salesmen. So Bulleit really has been built on premises, which is kind of, I'm told, that would represent a subtle, in this industry maybe, a unique case for in an MBA program because of the difference. I think that approach has been enhanced by our cocktail culture. Bulleit with the high rye whiskey has become a cult brand with the bartenders in our cocktail culture. You will notice, for instance, on Bardstown, they have 3 great mixologists, and that's a very small town. Here, of course, you have lots of wonderful bartenders and mixologists. But that is a culture that has been a real cultural change. It's like fine food or whatever. When the chefs became famous, in my lifetime, it wasn't just somebody's restaurant. Remember, Hassenauer's was here. You had Hassenauer on the restaurant. You didn't know who the chef was. You didn't care. He cooked your steak. Good. It's done or it's not. And now you have famous bartenders and you have famous chefs. The other thing is social media. All of those people know each other. So if somebody, and I'll never forget, I walked out of what is the great bar and restaurant in Charleston? Sounds like
Husk?
Exactly.
Was it Husk?
See, we made this interactive.
Yeah.
Husk. It's a great bar and restaurant. They win all sorts of big prizes. I was talking to the bartender. This was sometime. Walked out of there, and I didn't get 10 feet from the front door, and he yelled, said, "Tom, come back." John said hello. He'd put on the Facebook baby or something, or an Instagram, and it had gone to John was in Portland, Oregon, and it boomed like that, tell Tom hello. So it was really an amazing way that you can spider out in those among people of common interests.
Yeah, but even before social media, you were really focusing on the bartender.
Totally.
Yeah, you were, and your daughter Hollis.
Daughter Hollis is really active. We would go to Tales of the Cocktail. If you know any heard of Tales of the Cocktail, it's really a great event in New Orleans in July 23rd to 2022.
If you wanted to sweat to death, it's a great time to go.
It's a beautiful time in New Orleans, pleasant New Orleans, and you can swim around town. It's
Literally
a little humid. the Tales of the Cocktail, when it started 10 or 12 years ago, we've gone every year. Both of us have gone every year, I think.
I've not gone every year, but
With maybe 200 people. Last year, I'm going to guess they had maybe 20,000 bartenders from every place in the world. So it's great for brands to go. And Hollis, our daughter, I'll brag on Hollis, who is an egghead like Dad, an artist. She was inducted. I guess they indict us into the Distillers Hall of Fame, but inducted into the Dames Hall of Fame.
Yeah, the Dames Hall of Fame.
Yeah, Tales of the Cocktail.
So your focus has always been on the, from a strategy standpoint, you were always focusing on the bartender, and it really paid off for you. So when you came out with the 10-year-old, which is the next item on our tasting, I won't lead you through a tasting like I did last time. This will stay in conversation. But when you came out with, the 10-year-old, you kind of walked into a little bit of a different market. You were going from, the cocktail shaker to the Glencairn or the sipping glass, and you kind of changed focus a little bit there. Is this was that by design, or is this something that you always wanted to do, or?
Well, what we have done, we've had we call them our partners in chemistry. We have amazing partners with the bartending community and mutual respect for one another. And for instance, on our rye, very specifically, I was in the San Francisco market, the Bay Area, where we have a great market, and I was working with the whiskey a long time ago, and they said, Tom, you all have got a big footprint in rye with your heavy rye bourbon. Why don't you make us a full rye? We think that's going to come on. And in fact, obviously it has. So we listened to them, and at their direct request, went into the rye business. Excuse me, as you point out, I ate all of Fred's eggs earlier, so my stomach is a little iffy.
He did, he ate all my eggs. Typical Marine.
I was going to eat some of his cheese too, a typical Army guy. It was for him, not us. I stole it. So with regard to the 10, is a little bit different proposition. The 10, if we're going to taste the 10, again, maybe a little water, but the 10 is kind of more of a sipping whiskey, certainly. It's 10, 11, and 12-year-old whiskey. You state the youngest whiskey, obviously, on the label. That's one of the rules. It is the same mash bill. It varies subtly in proof, I am told, but certainly we did not make this call. It's 91.2 proof, that there is a sweet spot in age and proof, and that was Andrew Mackay made that. I think who has an infinitely better palate than I do, made that decision. But it's been I love our 10. I think it's great whiskey. I may think about relaunching that. I think it doesn't get the attention that I'd like to see it get.
So around the time that the 10-year-old came out, Diageo, who owns Bulleit, launched the Orphan Barrel series, and they had all these different whiskeys of various ages, and I tasted those, and my first thought was, why didn't they let Tom Bulleit have these for his brand, whether for blending purposes or for more age-stated releases? Did you try to get those older stocks? Did you have a say in that? I mean, how did that escape your grasp? How did those barrels?
No.
Yeah. Would you have liked to have had those?
No.
Why not?
Should I elaborate? Maybe I should elaborate.
Yeah, I'll keep asking.
Diageo wanted. We were seeing the craft movement come along, and Diageo, our partner, wanted to participate in that, and they had stocks. And you probably know more about this than I do. Oh, I'm sure you do. And they had stocks there at Stitzel-weller. That had been, and then probably stocks that were brought in from Burnham too.
Oh yeah.
So Stitzel-weller, and because the Stitzel-weller would have been wheated whiskey only, wouldn't it? And then probably stocks brought over from Burnham that they owned for a while.
And probably just a smidgen from Glenmore from when they purchased that in the 90s.
So they had a variety of older whiskeys, and they decided, well, the craft movement's coming out, and most of the time the craft movement, sometimes they're selling white whiskeys and stuff like that. And it said, well, we can come out with really old specialty products, which is their Orphan brand series. And they're great products. They would have been off recipe with us. We have, in addition to having a great rapport with the on-premises, our our on-premises and off-premises salespeople and our bartenders. We have worked diligently through the years with what we call family trips. We bring our distributors in. As a matter of fact, they're over at Stitzel-weller tonight, and I will go and say goodbye to them. They come in for 3 days, and we entertain them. So we've established an amazing rapport. We have 1,000, 2,000 friends that are salesmen with our different distributors. And what I want to keep, our sort of promise, that kind of comes back to two things. What flavored whiskeys may be great, but that we won't do flavored whiskeys. And
you're not going to do a cinnamon flavored Bulleit
marshmallow
cream. No.
I'm gonna let that one go. That may be a great idea, but I'm gonna let that one be your idea. We make straight whiskeys really for the bartenders to use. As a matter of fact, when we get to one of these, we'll talk about what we did instead of go forward. We went backwards. So I think, out of respect for those salesmen, I want to have a controlled portfolio. We have 4 marks now, and so when they go in, and they can now say when they're on their sales calls and say, well, would you like to buy? They have a lot of products, a lot of innovation in our business, but people will say, gosh, yeah, I'll take a case of Bulleit, that's great. So, and then they can proceed with their pitch on something they may be trying to get in. So I didn't want to proliferate our things under Bulleit. And really,
what do you think of the Orphan Barrel?
I was never much asked, and that would have been my position on that. I think they're extraordinary whiskeys. They're interesting whiskeys. Older, obviously. It's hard as the dickens to get our whiskey to age out like that, as you know, and everybody would.
And they're bottled in Tennessee.
I think they're bottled in Tennessee, right? The only thing we bottle up that we bottle there, Pauline bottles over at Stitzel is Bulleit. That all of our bottling, there's all sizes, everything is bottled there now.
So if they came to you and they said, before they did the Orphan Barrel, they said,
he's not going to let this go.
No. They have 15-year-old, let's say it's Stitzel-weller whiskey.
Right.
They say, Tom, we would like to put your label on it. You still wouldn't have taken it?
Probably. We would have talked about mash bill. We'll come back to the mash bill. I like that we've stayed on point with our mash bill through the 3 marks we have on it. And of course, the rye mash bill is the rye mash bill.
So you feel like having dipped your toe into a weeded bourbon, that would throw off kind of your
I think
flavor
so.
profile.
I think when our son Tucker may be coming into the business, and maybe Hollis, they may want to do something like that. But I think in my generation, we sort of make what we make.
Okay. When did your relationship with Diageo begin, and how has that went?
Well, we came in 1997. I fell uphill, and we partnered through just networking, knowing friends, and through my law practice and people I represented. Got together with Seagram's, Joseph E. Seagram's and Sons, which was a wonderful company. And they were good friends with the Goldring. The Brofman family were the dominant shareholders in that. It was a public company. I don't think anybody ever mentioned that to the Brofmans because they just did whatever they damn well pleased. And they were good friends with the Goldring family, so we had contracts and stuff down at Leestown Company. And they said, well, we want to get together with Tom on this brand. They were coming. Seagram's was coming back into they'd sold their bourbon brands, so we got together with them, and it was an amazing partnership. We were able to work with people like Art Peterson, who was their master blender, which is kind of like a master distiller, except from every place. He knew as much about whiskey as anybody. You could take almost any whiskey and put it in his hands. Have you seen people like that? Rub them, takes the alcohol out of it, smell it, he could tell you what the whiskey was and what was in it. And I do that, it just smells like lunch. So needless to say, I didn't have his job. So, and then just some amazing people to get together and implement our family recipe. And then we had it, do you remember, you've seen the old square bottle I was using?
Yeah.
And when we got together with Seagram's, after we got together, Art Shapiro in New York said, Tom, we are Joseph E. Seagram's, and we don't, a little bit like I'm Chevy Chase and you're not, we don't field products. It was an open mold, and glass mold. I was bringing the glass in from England, and we were bottling it there at Leestown. And he said, we'll have to design the glass. We'll have to design new glass for this. And I said, who would pay for that? And they said, well, we'll pay for it. I said, let's get that glass. How good is that? Perfect. So we proceeded to an enormously sophisticated project, brought in Steve Sandstrom, who I think you've met, and who's a genius industrial designer, and his charge was, we want to see the whiskey, we don't want it not to look like something else, we've got a bottle around here somewhere, and reflect the heritage of the brand. That bottle would have looked a little like a bottle, it would have been round probably, when Augustus was selling his bourbon. It's the old medicine bottle look, Glass Works in Ohio.
Now, this was on Deadwood.
Yeah.
And they had that. What did you think of that scene where they were holding up the 20th century or the 21st century bottle in the mid-1800s HBO show?
Well, I like Deadwood. I was in the Marine Corps, so I think they took most of the narrative directly out of the Marine Corps. The narrative, it's a little rough for the ladies. But if you get through that, it was a brilliantly produced show, and the art direction.
Oh, it was a great show.
The art direction was outstanding. In the second season, the art director called up and said, we want to put this, because it looks like it's supposed to look like, we want to put this in the series. And I said, oh boy, that'd be great. I said, I don't have any money at all for that. And he said,
they didn't charge you?
And he said, well, we'll just put it in there. I said,
yeah.
Yes.
And it was a very exceptional placement. I mean, the guy was holding it up at a rally, and
Well,
it was, so you didn't pay for that.
no, I didn't have any money.
When you partnered with Diageo, did they buy you, or did you retain ownership of the brand?
Diageo, we have are a lawyer, as I mentioned.
Yep.
So I brought those skills. As a matter of fact, at the front end of starting the business, I did all the intellectual property work. I did the contract work and now, of course, when we transitioned to Diageo, I had lawyers obviously work for us. A good idea to represent yourself. And then the same thing happened when we transitioned between Seagram's and Diageo. Mm-hmm. And all of those contracts are obviously confidential, but the family retains a partnership with them, which we're delighted with. They're great partners. As a matter of fact, when you get together, and I practiced law as a small, we had 14 lawyers, Bulleit, Kincaid, Irvin, and Reinhardt, and then so I was really used to small businesses. Our business before we got together with Seagram's was a small business, but both Seagram's and which was a family-oriented company, and Diageo, of course, is like the 8th largest manufacturer company in Great Britain, or something like that, or 11th.
Yeah,
really
huge.
big companies, and you would think, well, how do they interact with the families? So what we were talking with Ted Bassett was talking to Bill Samuels about why do they want you? Why do these big companies want you? Was a question that Ted asked. Bill Samuels and I both, Bill Samuels, Maker's Mark, and we answered it poorly, and he drilled us till we got a better answer. But I think, I will say our association with Diageo has been marvelous. I had colon cancer in 2005 and had, gosh, it looked like a lab rat, was in the hospital for a month at least that year, had chemotherapy, had tolerated very poorly, got a C. diff infection, I was a mess. But somebody said to me early on, you're either going to die or not. You don't have much control over that. But work, Tom. If you sit at home, feel sorry for yourself, you just sit at home. He said, work. So I must have looked awful. But Diageo configured my work around that year, and sometimes if you all have ever had, well, cancer's touched everybody one way or the other, and sometimes you take a shower and that's a heroic day, and then sometimes I was able to work and to get on the road and do stuff, and I credit that substantially with getting better.
You're the only American whiskey
that was a little off point.
that they have
He's
really
bringing us back.
From when they were United Distillers and Distillers Limited before, they just never appreciated American whiskey, but you're the only American whiskey brand that they have really put a lot of heart and soul into it. So whatever you've done there with a company that's very Scotch-centric, and kudos.
They're good. It's a good company, good people, and they know whiskey.
If you're anything like me, then you can't get enough about bourbon. And that's why I'm a subscriber to Bourbon Plus magazine. Bourbon Plus is a quarterly publication that tells the stories from the heart of bourbon, the farmers who grow the grain, the distillers who labor over the process, and the people like you and me who raise their glasses to celebrate it all. Subscribe to Bourbon Plus magazine today at bourbonplus.com, that's PLUS.com, and use code PURSUIT at checkout for $5 off your subscription. Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point-of-sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. Shopify's point-of-sale is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. And with Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers in-line and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns, from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. And get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone. Transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system or use Shopify's point-of-sale Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning 24/7 help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/bourbon, all lowercase, and go to shopify.com/bourbon to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/bourbon.
So you put something on your label when I first saw this, 10 years ago or whenever it was. I got into the government, my little government cheat sheet of what the whiskey labels were, and I could not find a definition for this. What is frontier whiskey?
That's Title 28, subsection 2, Romanet 3, Title A, subset A. Frontier whiskey, or Tom's whiskey. Yeah. Frontier whiskey, when we were, kind of comes back to when I was, Arthur Shapiro was the senior vice president. He said, we liked the whiskey, we liked the name, we think the recipe's really great, we're going to rebuild the glass. And he looked at me and he said, what is the concept? And I said, Arthur, what is a concept? And had no idea whatsoever, and that's sort of the marketing, what is this about? Jack Daniels, while we probably couldn't describe it, you would know exactly what you've seen the black and white ads for years, and that evolves out of a concept, a very narrowly defined concept. I said, I don't have a clue. So I went back and talked to my friend, John Bernbach, whose son was Bill Bernbach, the father of modern advertising. And he said, we just had a couple of guys retire from DDB, Daldane and Bernbach, which was the original Mad Men. As a matter of fact, the show is obviously a very loose characterization of that. They were the advertising firm maybe between 1956 and 1972. And Bob Makel, and so I got Bob Makel and Jack Mariucci, who were co-art directors, to come to Kentucky and to work with me, I sent them my library, which would include your books now. Then it was about 7 books, and they read the social history of bourbon. We all could pull out.
Gerald Carlson.
Pull out. You may be able to get online. Fred bought all the copies, I think, and so they read that, did a bunch of research, and he said, well, your recipe's coming out of the time when Kentucky was the frontier. So we like that. Frontier whiskey has sort of a nice feel. And now that has evolved into feeling, into kind of other things. I kind of like it. Obviously,
so frontier whiskey will stay on the label?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move to the rye, which was one of Don Draper's favorites. Speaking of Mad Men.
Oh, that's very good.
This rye, you launched rye in 2011?
Yes.
2011, and you guys automatically became the largest customer of the LDI or MGP, the Lawrenceburg, Indiana distillery there. How much rye are you purchasing from them?
Just exactly the right amount. We've had them lay down a lot of rye for a long time. He's mentioning the fact that Bulleit has, and I don't know if it was immediately, but it was Bulleit rye has become, maybe it has a 50% market share or has a very substantial market share at this point.
Yep.
And I think I would blame that on they make a superior product. They make a superior product. I think it's one of the, maybe the best. And we were going to continue with those contracts up there. We won't distill the rye.
You won't distill rye at the new distillery?
The new distillery. That would be all bourbon there. We won't distill the rye. We love our contracts with them. It's a great still. And I think one of the aspects, I had young Sam Burchett, who works for us, who's out with our folks, our Metro New York salesman over at Stitzel now. I asked him when he was like 22, I said, what do you like? What's the best thing about Bulleit? He looked at the price.
Yeah.
I thought that was very insightful. I think we way overperform at the price point. And both the bourbon and the rye, you can afford to buy them. The on-trade, the premises, the bartenders, or the restaurants can afford to buy the products and still make their margins. It's overperformed, good quality, and a little bit different with the heavy rye recipes.
Do you find that when you came out with the rye, you started seeing more rye cocktails? Because that was really when, the rye boom was it kind of started in 2007, but it wasn't until your rye came out that it really took off. And that was largely because of your strategy with the bartenders. They were making so many rye cocktails between 2011 and, even today. So the last 6 years, it's been a rye frenzy.
I think part of our real quick growth with the rye, nothing seems very quick to me at this age, but I thought, for instance, 30 years ago when I founded the company, it would take about as long as law school. It was not the case. So I think one of the things when we went out with our salespeople, went out to sell the rye, and particularly in the Bay Area, Metro New York, Chicago, New Orleans, these areas where they already had a great bartending culture, and the cocktail culture was really coming on. They said, we love your bourbon. We almost asked for that, put the rye in. So it got a great distribution very quickly with the on-trade. And I think that was because of the hard-won credibility that we'd earned with the bourbon.
Okay. So the bourbon helped open the door for the rye. Now, rye's flavor profile is traditionally not this high in rye. So that distillery created such a unique flavor profile that a lot of the consumers thought that's what rye was supposed to taste like. But now we're starting to see Pennsylvania rye make a little bit of a comeback. There's a lot more Kentucky rye being laid down. It's a very different tasting product. So do you foresee the rye whiskey growth continuing, or does that have a little bit more plateau potential?
I think, well, as a category, it's relatively small.
Very small.
Yeah. So as a category, so I see it growing. I see it growing primarily with the cocktail culture, and I think there's a lot of runway left with the cocktail culture, and domestically and internationally. Being with a partner with Diageo is wonderful. In that, I've always thought when I wrote the first business plan, I went to a library and I looked up. Do you know what a library is? Like you have to give the books back. I went to a library and wrote a business plan, and a big part of that was international. I think our international market can be bigger than the domestic ultimately for our American whiskeys, and I think there's a lot of runway left on the rye. We've launched in 60 countries now, and around in Western Europe. I'll be in Western Europe, and I've been around Asia. But the bartending culture that is taking place here in the U.S. and Great Britain and Germany, and there's some hotbeds of it, and where else you would not. Australia a little bit, but that's a very different market. I think there's a lot of runway, and the rye is very popular. For instance, when we're launching our bourbons, we usually launch the rye at the same time in the international market.
A lot of people will have two different brands for their rye. They'll have a different brand name for their rye than they will their bourbon. Did you consider that with Bulleit, or did you you wanted to keep the Bulleit name.
I think we wanted to keep the Bulleit name. Everybody did for that exact reason. Good credibility with the Bulleit Bourbon, a Bulleit Rye, and I think rather ingeniously that nobody thought of, I guess, that we fell uphill into, particularly if you get one of the on-trade or a bar or a restaurant behind on your back bar to line up the sort of the banner of Bulleit Bourbon, Bulleit Rye, and Bulleit 10. Then you've got a nice sort of family back there that really draws your eye to it. No, it was always going to be under it.
And at the new distillery, tell us about it. What's the size of the still? Give us all that good information. How big is it? How much output is it going to be putting out? How much whiskey is it going to be making?
I just read that in the newspaper. Isn't that amazing? They put it in the newspaper. I couldn't believe it. In Lexington on the front page.
People, in terms of the local mainstream people caring about those types of facts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that was really interesting. Well, we have Vendome here in you all know the Vendome here, and makes the stills right here in Louisville, which is a wonderful company. Makes everybody's stills, I think, I guess.
95% of the
a lot of stills. We had Vendome build the still, which I think is 54 feet high. What is it, 48 inches in circumference? It's a big still, substantial still. And I think what did we say? We're looking at maybe 1.8 million proof gallons per year coming out of that still, but it was built to be able to expand pretty readily, which we may do. We'll see about that. Ultimately, there'll probably be 12 warehouses up there. I'm really proud of our partnership with Shelby County. We looked around, obviously, at different places in Kentucky. We certainly wanted to make the bourbon here in Kentucky, and I think Pietro said he looked at one of the SVP in supplies, that he looked at 88 different sites, from helicopters and cars and every imaginable way to get around Kentucky. And when he saw the 300 acres we have in Shelby County, he said, this is it. I knew that's exactly what it is. So we acquired a 300-acre property in Shelby County that is surrounded on three sides with Guest Creek Lake, which is the water resource. It's got a great limestone water resource. That's the reservoir for Shelbyville and the county. And we've been, I think, enormous assistance to them in the integrity of white water and all sorts of things.
When will it be? When will people be able to visit it? Because it's not open for tours, right?
No, it's not. We've just finished. We've just started distilling a couple months ago, seriously, and we hopefully we may have a visitor center there in due course, which would really be nice.
It just became a wet county.
It just became a wet county, right?
Now, but you can still have the Bulleit stitzel-weller experience. Will that change now that you have your own distillery, or will that be like a Bulleit? Will you maintain the Bulleit outpost in Louisville?
Well, I think those things are all under consideration. Kevin, who we've just introduced us earlier, would know a whole lot more about it. I think at this point, the proposition, to the extent that we have a visitor's center, the proposition might be to maintain both, because it's the extraordinary historic significance. Yeah. We have something called the Bulleit Bourbon Experience, which I invite you all to come outside in Shively at the Stitzel-Weller. This is an amazing historic facility, opened on Derby Day in 1935. It's when people come out, I think, usually when people visit, when they visit our industry, that's one thing, but a lot of times when they visit the beverage alcohol industry, particularly the craft beer industry, you'll have the brewery, which is right there, maybe with a pub right next to it, and then you come out and see the old-fashioned American industrial America. I think there's 17 warehouses, 17 of the old-fashioned 9-story warehouses, maybe 108 buildings of one sort or another on 50 or 60 acres. When you see that sort of facility, I think, and it's really a great boon to our industry to have people go in. Bourbon Trail's really fun, I think, and each experience is a little different. I think that's one of the. It's not like, well, sometimes, for instance, if you've been to Napa, if anybody been to Napa Valley or out into California, when you go between them, I have, and I know zero about wine, minus zero about wine. But they can tend to be, other than the architecture is extraordinary, and if you're a wine aficionado, I'm sure you would really know the differences. But the experiences tend to be sort of the same. I think they're dramatically different here in Kentucky.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'm very excited to see what you will do at the Bulleit Distilling Company. Shall we take a look at the cask strength? And this is the cask strength is a category that was really just beginning when you started the in 1987.
Right.
You know, Booker was the first to kind of really try and make that work.
Booker's?
And Noah's Mill was there, and you had a few others. But tell us about the evolution of what consumers like, as there's a lot of cask strength products now, but what is the evolution of cask strength that you've seen in your career?
I think cask strength is, and I speak a lot of times as we were talking, we'll speak pretty much to the on-trade. The bartenders like the cask strength because they can do a lot with it. It doesn't dilute out fast. It's got a very distinct tone, so the bartenders like it, for one thing. But it's also, I think, and Booker, Noah was the first one. Fred Noah's father, and Freddie's grandfather was the first one to bring that to us, which is great whiskey. The Bulleit barrel strength is this probably 119. It's been between 119 and 123. But one of the reasons I am interested in it, we'll come back to our partnership in chemistry with the bartenders. They like cask strength, and instead of coming forward with what was our concept, marshmallow, raisin, bourbon, or whatever, instead of doing that, which is probably a good idea, what I wanted, instead of pulling our product forward or pulling our chemistry, I wanted to pull it back. So instead of chill filtering, it's unchill filtered like Booker's. Wanted to not chill filter it and bring it directly from the barrel at cask strength, and that lets them start their craft earlier in the process. I think they're interesting products. It has a distinct flavor. I was a little concerned that it was going to be very warm, but we use mostly ethyl alcohol in our bourbon, so it's less warm in the mouth and the throat than I thought. I think it's a nice product. We've had an extraordinary response. We haven't made much of it. I think we made 3,000. We may be in the process of making another 1,000, but it's.
Do you, are there going to be other products made at this distillery?
Well, in Shelbyville? Mm-hmm. No, we'll make Bulleit there.
Do you have
we may make variants of Bulleit there. We'll make the variants we have of Bulleit there, but there won't be other products made there.
Do you plan to put an age statement on your mainstay product?
Probably not. I think our bourbons age out. Age is really an interesting concept that we have battled in Kentucky. The bourbon fellas, as you know, have just battled marketing. Scotches are marketed very heavily on age, 12, 18-year-old, 20, old Scotch. And Scotches age not twice as fast, but substantially faster than bourbons. In my lifetime in Kentucky, it's been, and I'm older than dirt this year, so it's been a while, but my lifetime, it's been maybe 20 below zero Fahrenheit, and what was it a few summers ago, 103 or 4. So the huge variance in temperature. If you've ever been to Scotland, you will have noticed that the weather is uniformly dreadful. Uniform is what I want to emphasize. It sits in the North Sea, washed by the Gulf Stream. And so the temperature doesn't vary. The variance in temperature is what marries the wood to the liquid. So they take a lot longer. We also use first char. We can only use it once, the barrels one time, and then they go there and they can color their liquid. We can't. Everything you see is what you get out of the barrel. So age, it was interesting. Last year we have something called Camp Runamuck, which really isn't much of a Camp Runamuck. We bring 150 bartenders twice a year to Kentucky. 4 or 5 of the distilleries do that. And they came in, and I asked them, that question comes up. They said, well, what are you going to do next? And I said, well, probably not much, and they like that. And then what would you all like to see? I said, I'm kind of a symmetry guy. We've got a bourbon and a 10, and maybe would do a rye in a 10-year-old or something like that. And they said, it was really interesting. It surprised me, Fred. They said, we trust the distillers in Kentucky to age their bourbons fully and appropriately. These are really sophisticated connoisseurs of bourbon, and people really know the industry. And I said, thank you. And I said, what we would rather have than an age statement, because that doesn't mean anything to us. We would rather see a cast strength rye.
Well, I could bring you another audience who would be happy to tell you what an age statement means to them.
Well,
there's a large body of consumers who would love to see every bottle have an age statement. Yeah. Well, and the reason being is because...
And I understand that, like Preston and Julie and Van Winkle make beautiful aged bourbons, and I understand that. But I will go as far as to say that on our side, on the production side of it, we don't see much significance in it. But to the extent that the consumer does, we will learn to think much of it.
The bartenders are fantastic. They're a great audience for you. And, they have an absolute objective. And so their objective is much different than what I see in the market of connoisseurs or those coming up the ranks who just want to taste. They're members of Bourbon Brotherhood or whoever. They want to compare and contrast. And no one knows exactly where all your whiskey's come from. No one knows the exact age of every maker's mark they get. I mean, there's a range. I mean, but is there more 5-year-old bourbon in this bottle than there was in the last one? So as consumers, we like comparing and contrasting, and that started developing in the wine world. And in the wine world, you pick up a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon now, you'll see exactly where those grapes were. You'll see the type of fermentation it had. You'll see the blend amounts. Mm-hmm. So the wine community picked up on that and they took advantage of it. Whereas it seems like the American whiskey side are doing just the opposite. Instead of capturing that enthusiasm, there's an effort to, get more products on the shelves without listening to that particular audience, because people are still buying the whiskey. So if you have a chance, and the next time you guys discuss these sorts of things, I would say a lot of people appreciate that you put a 10-year-old statement on there. And if you put a six-year-old on that one, I think people would appreciate it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But that's just me. I'm just a curmudgeon.
So you would vote for like a 10-year-old rye, and the 10-year-old bourbon is 10, 11, and 12. You have to state the youngest, of course.
That's right.
And I don't even know. You probably can't say 10, 11, and 12. You probably could just say 10.
Yeah, you would have to do 10 for it. It's the same for every spirits category,
right.
Including rum, which violates it horribly. But
so you would vote for the 10-year-old rye.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because
that's interesting.
Yeah, and because it gives me something to compare and contrast. Sure. And while I respect everyone's position, and you guys have your own whiskeys and companies.
But as you point out, for instance, you all tried the bourbon, our 5 to 7, 6+ year old bourbon, and then you tried the 10, 11, and 12, and the difference in proof is very subtle, but the difference in taste is substantial, isn't it? I wanted it to be different.
Yeah.
To your point. So there is, and the mash bill is the same, the yeast is the same. What's different is it's substantially 40% older or whatever, and creates a different product.
Well,
see, I'm a lawyer. I can take either side of the case.
You have a great opportunity to set an example for the industry by putting age statements on every one of your releases coming forward. And I'm so glad you're going to do that. That's awesome.
As the judges say, I will take that under advice.
Yes. Well, it's been a great evening. You are the guy who came into the business when people were leaving, and you've built something that no one thought you could. And here you are, you've got the world ahead of you and for your son Tucker, for your daughter Hollis. I mean, Bulleit Distilling Company is in how many countries now? 60?
60.
It's amazing. So
surreal.
What is the future? What do you want to happen for Bulleit Distilling in the next 20 years?
I think this is certainly building a distillery is a life dream. Actually, at this point, it's a little surreal, as you can imagine. And I can very distinctly what I think most often when I look at the distillery is I cast back into going into a liquor store and say, how about you buy a bottle of Bulleit? And they say, how about we don't, Tom? We have just exactly enough bourbon. So when it evolves like this, it's really kind of surreal. I think this is certainly a benchmark, but people tell me life is a journey, and certainly a business and something when you have a passion like this is a journey. I'm really looking forward to our international markets. I'm looking forward to developing in breadth and depth the domestic market. I think one of the most exciting things is to have the family come in. I didn't anticipate that might happen, which may happen.
Well, if I may, everyone grab your favorite Bulleit of the evening. I personally am going to reward the 10-year-old age statement. I see a lot of empty glasses out there. You can raise a toast and smell the remnants of it. But this is to Tom, the Vietnam veteran, the bourbon founder, to Bulleit Distilling.
Well, thank you. Thank you all.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers, and we'll clink our glasses here, and then we'll do another one. To our host, the Derby Museum. I had seen recently here that I came in before you all did, and watched the film. I'd seen it some years ago, but it is just amazing. If you all haven't come here to the Derby Museum and see this film, it is inspirational. I think it's just a beautiful film with wonderful with wonderful sound behind it. It's
They do a brilliant job here.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah. Thank you to our host.
Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.
Does we now have time for questions? And by the way, we have a silent auction going on back there. I didn't mention this earlier, but we have a silent auction going on for limited edition bottles. Only 1,000 were signed by Tom, and it's in celebration of the new distillery, and it's got a special label on it. So we have 4 of those tonight. Please go up there and bid on those as you like. But we're welcome to take questions now. If you have any questions, we have one right here. So you got a microphone coming along. Thank you.
And that is a great question. The question was, how does bourbon differ from the rye? And specifically, as we narrow it down a little bit, is the aging process the same? The big category up here is whiskey. And under whiskey, you're going to have Scotch, Irish, bourbon, Tennessee whiskey, Canadian whiskey, Japanese whiskey.
Irish, Scotch, Mexican
Scotch,
whiskey.
Mexican, so lots of whiskeys.
Yeah.
Bourbon is one category of that, which is narrowly defined in Title 26. We went back to that, the tax code, because they want to tax it.
CFR.
And exactly, Code of Federal Regulations. And rye whiskey is defined there too, and it is a different type of whiskey. For instance, rye whiskey, our bourbon is, as I mentioned, is 2/3 corn, 1/3 rye. It has to be 51% corn, and there's other rules that go along with it. The rye has to be 51% rye, and there's other rules that go along with that. They're very similar. We make straight whiskeys to make straight whiskeys. There's other categories called blended whiskey, but our bourbon is straight Kentucky bourbon whiskey, so that's very narrowly defined. The rye whiskey over here is straight rye whiskey, and that's also narrowly defined. And with respect to both, we have to use new white oak, and we use a number 4 char. I think most people use a number 4 char. Bulleit Makers uses number 3 maybe, but most of us use a number 4 char. And in both instances, we can only use the barrels once. The timber industry lobbied that in, so we'd buy more barrels, and we do, and we try to lobby it out, but for the fact that 95% of Scotch is aged in these bourbon barrels of rye, and there's an immediate market for them.
So to add to that, rye actually is different in bourbon, and that bourbon can never have any coloring or any flavoring added. Whereas if the label does not say straight rye, and it just says rye whiskey, then they're allowed to add up to 2% of flavoring. For example, Templeton, which is a common brand, it also acquires stocks from Lawrenceburg, Indiana. They add a proprietary flavoring agent, and the label does not say straight rye. But with bourbon, there's no additives that can be added. But for rye, if it doesn't say straight, there is a chance that it could have some additives. Geek stuff. Oh, good question. Is Bulleit going to come out with a bonded bourbon?
We did.
A bottled and bond?
Yeah. Our old Bulleit Thoroughbred, when I was with, it's bottled and bond.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What year was that?
That came out in 1994, but that's when we were with Bill Goldring, and we haven't, and that's always an interesting concept, and I think in a nice credibility factor, and probably I would imagine we will, as our new our whiskeys we're making now won't be available for quite some time, but I think probably as our whiskeys come out of there, we probably will. It's a nice factor. When I was growing up, they had a lot of bottling bond in the 50s, in the 40s and the 50s. That was it's an indicator I think, a further indicator of integrity. It's a nice kind of like straight whiskey we were just talking about. Yeah, it's a good question.
Hi, Fred. Hi, Tom. So, Tom, congratulations on the opening of the new distillery. So this is kind of a two-parted question. One, have you named, maybe I've missed it, have you named a new head master distiller? And then two, did you go through contracting anybody for actually helping you set everything up and actually start the distilling process?
Oh gosh, no, we've not named a master distiller. We're kind of thinking about that. The way we run the distillery is with a team approach. And we're kind of thinking about where we go with that and how we explain that to the industry. I need to talk to you about that. It's kind of an interesting proposition. So the answer we haven't is the answer to the first, and maybe won't. We'll kind of see how that happens. And gosh, yes, Dan Fieser was the primary engineer. Our partner Diageo. Of course, this is an immensely complex machine that makes whiskey. It's an agricultural processing facility, is what a distillery really is. But as you can go online and see it, and we brought in Fluor Corporation, brought in the very best people in the world to create, build the distillery and design it, and design the amazing environmental integrity it has. Literally the best people in the world were brought in. By Diageo. Diageo has built any number of distilleries through the years, and medium size and big ones, so they probably has as much expertise in this as anybody in the world has ever had.
So it sounds like they're taking more of a Johnny Walker approach with the team thing.
A little bit, kind of, and we're kind of thinking about that at this point.
Great question.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you.
No further questions.
See, the educated audience, they're going to get you.
Old lawyer. Any more questions?
All right. Well, please.
Anybody like to come up here and do some public speaking? It's open. You can do that if you like.
And you have already pre-signed bottles, right? You signed some bottles. We have the silent auction items up there. You'll find one of my books up there. Happy to sign those for you if you'd like. Hollis is your daughter's prominently featured in Whiskey Women. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
You knew that, of course.
Thank you. Yeah,
but again, Tom,
I bought 1,000 copies.
1,001 tonight. Yeah. All proceeds go to the Kentucky Derby Museum, a nonprofit. So, the silent auction is tax deductible since it is a nonprofit. So, thank you all so much for coming out. We will stick up here to answer any questions. But Tom, thanks again.
Yeah, Fred, thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. So thank you all for coming and supporting the museum. Thank you all. That's wonderful.
Pretty awesome, right? We thought so as well. Do me a favor, go to iTunes and write a review for our podcast. It helps go a long way in growing the listenership for the official podcast of Bourbon. And if you like this episode in particular, please send me an email. It's theduo, THEDUO, @bourbonpursuit.com. I want to be able to take this and forward it on to the Kentucky Derby Museum and let them know how much our listeners enjoyed it. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you all next week.